Hello, my name is Ina. I'm a longtime Final Fantasy XIV player, and like I said already in previous videos, um, I'm watching the journeys of several World of Warcraft players, one of them also being Bellular, which is not easy to watch because he's actually not streaming, unlike all the other ones like Asmongold and Rich and everyone basically. So I'm very interested to see what he thinks about the game. I know he has said some stuff on his live stream, but his live stream is very long and usually at a time where I am actually working. So most of the time I'm not watching that live stream. And with this video, he also started a new channel for more non-World of Warcraft content. So I think that's actually a good idea because his main channel is so associated with WoW that, at least me personally, I generally do not pay a lot of attention to his main channel. It's more like his clips channel actually that I pay more attention to. So I'm very interested to see what he thinks. I believe he has finished A Realm Reborn, but I'm not entirely sure how far he is at this point. But he certainly is the slowest of the bunch. And then is Asmongold. Asmongold is the second slowest of the bunch.
Yep, it's time for a new channel. You're going to get a lot of MMO content on here, even sorts of things we've never done before. But enough of that, it is Final Fantasy XIV time. Because it looks like Matt got Asmongold and myself both. I've kind of dallied about for sure, but now it's time. This is my Final Fantasy XIV experience.
Well, we probably should all say our thanks to Matt then to introduce Final Fantasy XIV to other people. Thank you so much.
FF14's introductory experience is okay. I can see why some people bump off it, but it's not a problem for most of us because we end up coming to FF14 with the wind of our friends' recommendations at our backs. So, where for some, eyes could gloss over at lots of text, well, for me, they didn't. Right? Most of us paid attention because we would know that it would build somewhere. And even before my first steps into Heavensward, I can tell you that, yeah, it does.
He is already in Heavensward? Huh. And I kind of wonder if they recorded his reaction to the Parting Girls quest. Because I would be really interested to see his reaction to it, considering it basically A Realm Reborn ends with such a bang for most people. Then that reaction is very interesting to see for literally everyone.
Does indeed build. The combat is slow at the start. The stakes are smaller, but there's detail there to appreciate. There's a world to soak in. Take The Expanse as an example. I love the TV show. It's got a lot of dense world building during its first season, but by the end of season 1, well, its pace hits. The pieces come together, and then it hits its stride. And from what I can tell, FF14 is kind of like that. You do have to put in that extra work and that extra attention to the details early on, but if you do, you're rewarded.
Yes,
this
you
is
are.
the anti-spam quest text game. So if you're willing to meet it at that pace, then your chances of having a good time, I think, are pretty damn high. Now for me, the initial MSQ and Archer job quests were, while not thrilling, certainly compelling enough. You know, there was constant hints of there being something far greater, all of those Heidelin teases. It's like, interesting. So, all of that had me pretty excited when I was, level 12, 13, 14. So how did things go when the game really started to branch out? Okay, it's time to talk about the narrative of FF14. You leave your starting experience with the reinforcement of the Garlean Empire as a looming threat, and compared to the quite a bit more peaceful forests of Britannia where I started...
You know, maybe Pyromancer and Bellular should have a chat with each other. You know, I think that could be very interesting, especially for people who played those games, and then they can compare the narratives and maybe overlapping themes and stuff like this.
Well, they did seem like a foe worth fearing. Of course, knowing of FF14 Legacy and what's covered in the opening cinematic, you'll kind of understand a little bit more there, and you'll be kind of excited to see these big cheesy villains. Now from here, the main narrative flips between dealing with the emerging primal threat and then the Guardian Empire. Of course, I'm going to save the details and not do spoilers, but suffice to say, during this, the gang comes together, right? Square Enix successfully nail that sense of threat, and they do a real good job of taking you around Eorzea, slowly building up that world, making those city-states feel like places. And there's good and there's bad here. The pacing really does dip, and some bits are a bit of a slog. Take that Costa del Sol segment. You probably know it if you played the game. It's just okay, it can be a bit jarring. Some of those bits your friends tell
This is always a saying. Believe me, it was a lot worse some months ago.
I met them again, and it felt great.
A lot
the growth that my
worse.
character had experienced was totally recognized in a few neat lines of dialogue from that NPC. Made the world feel a bit more real. And while I'm sure many of these pacing problems could be fixed up in a rework, I also get why it is this way. For me, what mattered was the payoff, and I did get that. I actually felt I understood how this world came together, how I fit in this world. But really, it wasn't until the Garuda cutscene that it all clicked. A bit like that moment at The Expanse again, where the crew of the Rossi and finally meet up in Season 1, where the plot points converge,
He's really into that show, huh?
quickens, and bam, you are
I actually never was into that.
stretch of narrative. Now, is the voice acting great?
No.
God, no. Please, I never want to hear a word of pre-Heavensward Minfilia again. Is the voice acting consistently used? No, it is not an ARR. But does it somehow still manage to be more than the sum of its parts? Yeah, it does, and some of the characters I do like well enough. Does it do all of this while setting up enough of the world to have you interested in what will happen next?
Yes.
When the Ul'dah refugee crisis began in the ARR patch, MSQ, I was pretty engaged and interested. What they really nail, though, is you, because you are the chosen one. And it's pretty damn clear from the start, unlike in World of Warcraft, where you sort of assume the role of the chosen one on a per expansion basis, with seemingly very little character continuity between them, and just main characters who kind of forget who you are. It's weird. But in FF, it's a role you grow into, and as you do, the world recognizes you. And I could talk about this in an MMO context all day, but you feel, very fucking unsurprisingly when you think about the game's title, you feel like a core character in a JRPG. It's almost as if this is in fact a Final Fantasy game.
Well, it is a Final Fantasy game. Don't underestimate the nostalgic in that game.
Now, story-wise, much is told through cutscenes and dialogue. Dialogue is where you are talked to directly. Your character reacts to NPCs. So gone is this sort of feeling I've taken for granted in MMOs. NPCs talking at me. And the dialogue itself is usually great. NPCs speak colloquially. Jack or Jackie and his crew.
Actually, now that I think about it, he probably will get a kick out of some of the dialogue that is written later on that uses a lot of real-world references like Shakespearean poems and stuff like this. He will get such a kick out of that.
Rogues? They're great. They talk like rogues. They swear, slur, and swagger their way through life in Limsa, and they're just a great bunch. Not at all like the ninja I'd go on to meet, or some of the proper stuck-up elves, Elzen even. And then the Lalavels, they may be these wee folk, but they're not written that way, that's for sure, and they're quite fun. So really, what else is...
Well, it looks like he actually did finish the parting guide.
Character that knows the other characters, and you're going through a journey together. It's all believable in the world. It's immersive. Now, to be fair, you can certainly tell that the realm was reborn while the developers were working on putting Legacy to bed. But even with that, it is more than the sum of its parts. That's the important bit. Just be ready for some rocky pacing, some boring bits, and for setup and world building, that'll only really pay off later.
Yeah. It really, really will pay off, and he doesn't even know remotely how it will pay off.
Killing a few NPCs, collecting a few items, and really often feeling like a visual novel with iffy pacing told through fetch quests. And this is absolutely the roughest part of the game, from what I could tell, and from what everyone's told me. Now, there is like a bit of a saving grace. Duties. The solo duties are kind of like the miniature narrative scenarios that WoW has, and they just focus on portraying a scene. And this is where you can tell the devs get a bit more creative and the production values go up. So moments like breaking into an enemy base with Sid, or fighting a spoiler at the end of the Ninja campaign, those are all told through these duties, these sort of story duties. There's, I think, just something to be said about, having a solid in-game cutscene and some really good dialogue, and then going into some pretty good scripted gameplay. And also, you can sometimes die in those if you turn your brain off and spam about.
Oh, yes.
So overall, it's great. Content.
To my big embarrassment, Xenos has probably killed me on more than one occasion.
Is simple for the most part. Do not expect mind-blowing questing from the beginning. Take it as going through a fun VN with occasionally fun gameplay segments, all while you're exploring a cool world and getting to know its characters. This apparently does get much, much better in the expansions, though, so I'm dead excited for that.
And then they shout him. Really?
Well, I'd say pretty good. I mean, narrative pacing issues aside, it is all rather smooth. You just follow the MSQ, and you keep up with your job quests. You then have fates in the world. Fates are a bit like world quests in the World of Warcraft, but the key thing is the progress is shared and they happen in the world. So they spawn in and out in this player-driven way. And it all feels very cooperative, right? A bunch of you meet up together, defeat the enemies, complete the fate together. I think Guild Wars 2 does a lot similar, and it just made me realize how much Blizzard needs to catch up on the world content front. And there's the hunting log. I thought it was neat. Rather than giving you loads of reasons to just randomly kill mobs, the hunting log is basically just a kill list for each job within a level bracket. Kill a few of each mob, and you'll get...
And I'm pretty sure I already said that, but the hunting log is a great way to level secondary jobs, actually.
But you might have a little deviation from your path to kill a mob and get some extra XP. So rather than randomly...
Quite a lot of XP, by the way.
Like a gate to the story, they feel like a reward for paying a little bit more attention to your surroundings when you're going around the world. And I thought that was quite cool. Quite a bit more positive, though that system does evolve into something different in the expansions, I believe. Then there's alt job level.
It does.
It's really well supported in the game, actually. Your alt jobs will actually enjoy an XP boost if they're way below your main job. So just milling around the world doing fates while you're, of course, queuing for roulettes, which is just the leveling via dungeons, do your daily roulettes thing. I mean, that meant that my level 32 transition from Bard to Rogue and then up to Ninja felt really smooth. And plus, it meant that I had another narrative to play, and the Rogue narrative is great. Lulls in pacing, such as the pre-Garuda segment, certainly detracted from my experience, but for the most part, yeah, I was a happy camper.
That's good. I'm glad he was happy.
It starts so slow.
Really?
They really designed this game to be accessible to people who do not play MMOs. That said, job complexity absolutely does grow over time. Hello, Ninja. But it is a bit dull at the start. 2.5 seconds GCD.
I guess the Mudras,
sort of slow doling out of abilities can feel rough. Mobs in ARR aren't that interesting either. And most of the initial dungeons are, while nicely themed, not really super engaging as dungeons. Now where things get better is the primals that you fight. Those give you a taste of scale, and some of the later duties as well, and the late ARR MSQ and ARR patch MSQ are pretty good. So from what I understand, really ARR is by far the worst bit in terms of gameplay, and it only goes up from there, with things especially like their encounter design language really evolving and becoming codified as they progress, I believe, through the Heavensward expansion. For what it's worth, the sheer scale of things like the primal fight from Into the Maelstrom, I mean, that was just cool. So overall, it's... Actually,
Leviathan is probably my favorite primal in the post patches.
As for the visuals then, well, art direction's fantastic.
I know most people like Shiva, but I prefer actually Leviathan. I really like Leviathan.
Brilliant thing, just a bit more diversity there. While it does fall over a little bit in the technical side, like their anti-aliasing implementation.
Yeah, the Crystal Axle, I can tell you a whole story about that.
Yeah, it's that thing where there's a few technical aspects that can be jarring at the start, especially with how good like modern games look these days. But overall, that bit's fine. Good art direction is what's most important, and that really is what they do have. Also, a zone design thing. They feel open. They feel like real places instead of tightly crafted, ultra-dense gameplay levels. And that's something I had found a bit frustrating in some of the modern World of Warcraft world content, and I kind of missed from its older days. So,
So far, I understand World of Warcraft is like an open world, right?
a quick note
Right?
on player expression.
I'm not sure,
I don't say
actually.
much about this because I've had such a limited perspective, but I will say this. My trips through Limsa often take far, far longer than they should because I'm, checking out people's armor, seeing what they're doing. Now, the glam system is not as slick to use as WoW's transmog system.
I wish we would have that transmog system.
The that are being glammed are really fantastic.
I really wish we would have it, because I'm pretty sure everyone at this point has run out of space for their glamours.
Seem to be fine with letting something be a bit silly in the name of fun and player expression, which I like. And this just leaves its mounts and glams being cool. Just wait till I get stuck out into, kitting out my apartment, right? Or properly spending time at our FC house, which the guys have decked out completely. I mean, that will be fun. While not exactly my thing, I couldn't not mention G-Pose here. It's something I look at from the side, and I think it's cool. So between it and the potential of the glams, FF14, it's made things like fashion mags and sites like NorsiaCollection.com exist. I mean, the guy in my free company is a nightclub bouncer in the game in his free time. John, on our team, has probably edited this video too. Hello, John. He's been spending some of his time making music on Bard. It's just cool even seeing bards just around the cities playing music. The game just feels very open and expressive, and I really like that. That stuff's not exactly my gameplay style, but being in a world where that's really strong, that's, I don't know, is it a positive aspiration? It's like even if you don't engage, the world is better for its existence, and you exist in that world.
I would like to put, I happen to agree. I mean, I myself, I don't do the music stuff either. I don't spend millions and millions and millions on glamour. That doesn't mean that I'm not glad that it exists, because I do like to watch it, and other people can be as creative as they want to be. I think it's such a great thing. It's always a shame when other games do not quite allow you that kind of freedom. There's one thing, my husband actually played Lord of the Rings online a long time ago, and one thing he particularly liked was that he could write his own music. Like, that game is huge, so you could do many things in there, but he remembered and liked to make music.
Patches then. I'm in the ARR patch MSQ at the minute dealing with Ishgard, so it's totally setting up the Heavensward expansion. And it's exciting. Now what's been neat to see is the general increase in quality. It's almost as if with these patches they weren't rebuilding the game while also maintaining the legacy version. The newly cast voice actors, like for some of the Ishgardian characters, they're far, far better. There's also more voice acting. The plot lines feel more tight and focused. There's less padding, the new characters are great additions, and it just feels better. The pacing is better, the narratives are just better executed.
Now I'm actually kind of unsure where exactly he is. Because if he's only there, that's the Shiva patch. So he did not do the parting glass yet. So maybe they just put in some of the cutscenes from the end to confuse us. So I hope they will record his reaction to the parting glass.
So I can just tell that this is where the team is beginning to hit their stride. So I guess no wonder all of the memes that people have about Heavensward. Getting hints as well at more proper boss fights has been quite fun too in these quests. I mean, sure, they don't have their boss fight language like super well worked out, but I'm beginning to feel like what a more proper MMO boss fight is in FF. And honestly, a part of that too has been that it's just been refreshing to jump into a boss fight with no add-ons. And even hearing some WoW Mythic Raiders meme about banning weak auras after they've hopped into FF14, I mean, you can certainly understand that, can't you? Still, I'm in no position to...
Now I can, because I'm not a WoW player, so...
Other than, look, I'm happy enough to do both.
I do, however, can see some of these people having very cluttered UIs.
I'm in. I hope I'll be able
Very
to
annoying to
finish
see.
Shadowbringers by the time Endwalker comes out. But I mean, I sure as hell didn't rush through AOR,
Probably
did I?
not, because Endwalker will be out in like, what, 43 days?
So I'm going to keep going at my own pace.
Yes, do that.
Definitely want to play a lot more. I'm just enjoying it as I go. So hopefully I'll be there at cap, ready to jump into Endwalker with the rest of you. But even if I'm not,
Well, even if
I'll
not,
play
it's not like it's running away.
and I'm happy to. And that's one of the things people really love about FF14. It doesn't feel like it has that feeling of rush. And for the leveling and questing bit, WoW doesn't really either. I think the difference is that FF14's questing is telling one big, gripping story masterfully through multiple expansions, whereas WoW is telling a series of partially related, super speedy, fast stories. WoW feels more like I'm playing a game.
In the end, you have like Final Fantasy XIV is a story that keeps continuing until it reaches its end, or its conclusion was Endwalker. And after that, we will start a new story.
They seem to get their player base more. Simply put, beyond playing a fun single-player story, I am beginning to feel just more confident investing my time into this MMO because I trust the track record of those making it. They don't seem to have a track record of dud expansions and big bungles and big problems and big dramas. And
we don't have big dramas. That doesn't mean that we necessarily liked everything. The Diadem was their first attempt at something like Eureka and Bosia, and that didn't quite work out, but there was a very specific player group who wanted to have Diadem, which were the Gatherers. And one particular thing that was extremely annoying when Diadem first came out, you had all these fighting classes there and you just wanted to do your gathering and they were constantly in the way. I was one of these people who always said, like, maybe we could just use that island for us as a gathering option and for gathering content. Or also the crafters, which at this point it is purely for the gatherers and the crafters to do the Ishgard restoration, though at this point Ishgard is restored, but maybe something we could use, maybe something similar for Garlemald or something like this, when we have to rebuild Garlemald. So they're sometimes they don't hit with sport with the player base, but that doesn't mean they don't try something new, and then if people don't like it, they might evolve it. And in the case of Diadem, it evolved all the way to Bosia. And for me personally, Bosia is probably the best. It's not that I didn't like Eureka, but I liked Bosia a little bit more. It felt more polished, etc. So it's not like we don't have our own controversies. Of course we have them.
Sure, I know that people do rate Stormblood as not being as good as Heavensward, but I'm pretty sure people still rate it pretty damn highly. And that is different from the constant back and forth of the WoW expansions.
Actually, I think Stormblood was great. The second part, like the patch cycles, were really great, and it was more like the base. What people didn't quite like with Stormblood is that the story was told on two different continents. You had like the Doman story and the Alamegan story, and people were actually looking forward to just the Alamegan story because it's such a long running one, already since 1.0. So people were actually looking forward to the to finish this particular storyline. And then it was split up to Doma, and Doma was way more interesting, I guess, because you had way more interesting characters. The areas were prettier. So, and then you had the problem with Ida suddenly not being Ida, but she was Lise, and people didn't quite understood that. So, and that's why people don't like Stormblood.
They're better by the end patch, and then the next expansion maybe has promise, and it just gets very tiring, and it doesn't seem like that goes on in this game. And I think that explains why a lot of WoW refugees are maybe moving out of their comfort zone and into Eorzea. Maybe they have a bit more faith in it. So there you go. that is my
Yeah.
initial Final Fantasy.
I do think you can have a lot of. I personally have
One of my main goals now.
I personally have a lot of faith into the Final Fantasy XIV team, which is why I'm also very excited for Final Fantasy XVI. I have, even though the product is not out yet, I have absolute faith in them. They made Heaven's Ward. I'm sure they can make a Final Fantasy XVI game. But I do have faith that I will get a decent product that I paid for and that I monthly pay for, even if I don't play for a month. So yes, he's right. I do have personally a lot of faith into the developer.
Is to carve out more time to actually just sit down, chill, relax, play the game, throw it on the big TV, get the big cinematic experience, enjoy the spectacle of the big fights. That's what I want to do. I hope you found this interesting. Let me know what this means for your own decision making with this game. Sorry for being so late, we really were. And I'll see you next time.
All right. He had some interesting thoughts. I hope his new MMO channel will keep growing. I hope they will record his reaction for the end of A Realm Reborn. I'm pretty sure they said they would in one of the live streams. Nonetheless, I'm looking forward to see his Heaven's Ward journey. I'm also hoping that Asmongold will continue his journey because otherwise he is probably not going to make it to Endwalker either. At this point, I would say Preach might even be faster. So I will keep watching and cheering you all on, and I hope all of these videos might give people the idea that Final Fantasy XIV is not just some weird Japanese anime waifu thing, MMO, but it's a place you know, can play or do whatever you want. So thanks for watching and have a lovely day.